is the Ford Kuga, and its little brother, the Puma, has been getting so many awards lately from many a cardigan-wearing journalist. But the Kuga, while up until recently was quite long in the tooth, it is now hugely improved, not only with much sleeker styling, but also more environmentally friendly engines and, crucially, a much nicer interior. But can it live up to the hype that was the Ford Puma? Well, today I'm going to find out. But before I get into the review, remember to hit the like button and subscribe for more awesome reviews just like this one. Now, usually when I do these design breakdowns, they're pretty straightforward because typically, no matter which car you go for in a range, they always look exactly the same. The cheaper model maybe has a bit more plastic on the outside, the range topper maybe a bit more black trim. It's not that with the Kuga though. So the version that we have here is the ST Line X edition. So you get a front end that's a little bit sportier and yes, is blacked out. But if you go for the entry-level Z-Tech or Titanium, you get a different front end altogether with a more angular and overall more kind of beefier looking grille. I actually prefer the look of the cheaper cars, but if you go for the Vignale, you get this front end, but instead of it being blacked out, you have a chrome line that runs around the outer edge. Now, what I find quite interesting about the Kuga is that it's actually very popular in the US, of where it's called the Escape. I think it's a properly good looking car, particularly on the ST Line X edition, of where we have these 19-inch diamond cut wheels. There's something very ominous about it, and in all fairness, this is a proper SUV, a sports utility vehicle. But it's the back end that's my favourite part of the car because it properly looks like a police interceptor. It's a really aggressive look, particularly in black, with these nice sharp looking lights and angles coming down here. It's got a lot of muscle to it. And we've also got dual exhausts, which are completely real. Now, the cool thing about this particular model, the ST Line X, is that I can actually open the boot without using my hands. Come on. There we go. Works flawlessly. And the idea is that if you've got shopping, then you don't have to drop it to open it up. Anyway, so in the boot, we've got 475 litres, but you can actually expand it up to 526 if you move the rear seats forward a bit, although you will crush the legs of those inside. It's a really big boot, and you do have a bit more storage underneath the floor. Now, technically, the Skoda Karoq has a bigger boot, but the difference is so small, I kind of regret bringing it up. I've just completely wasted your time. Moving on to the engines, and there's a lot to unpack here. So, the petrol range kicks off with a 1.5 litre EcoBoost available in either 118 or 148 brake horsepower form. Now, the former is only available on the Z-Tech and gets from 0 to 60 in a not so brisk 11.6 seconds. Go for the latter though, and you'll get to 62 a bit quicker in a time of 9.7 seconds. Both are front-wheel drive and come with manual gearboxes. No automatics for the petrols. Now, the diesel is available in 3 different forms. It starts off with a 1.5 litre like the petrol and produces 118 brake horsepower. Then there's this one right here, which is a 2 litre, producing 148 brake horsepower, and crucially, this one comes with mild hybrid assistance to eke out a little bit more fuel. What's different to the petrols though is that you can get this both in manual and also as an automatic. But there's one more diesel car, and that's the range-topping model, which doesn't come with electrification for some reason, but it is all-wheel drive and can get from 0 to 62 in a very brisk 8.7 seconds. But that's not all. There's also 2 hybrids that you can go for. So there's a regular hybrid, which switches between electric power and combustion power automatically at lower speeds. And there's also a plug-in hybrid variant that you can charge up and drive on electric energy alone for up to 35 miles. You see, Ford has got you covered no matter what engine you want, unless you want a V12 or a turbocharged V6 or a Formula One engine or any kind of racing. It's got most engines covered. As is the case with most of Ford's range, there is an extensive trim and price list. Now, it all starts off with the Z-Tech at £26,800, and the range-topping Vignale carries a £6,000 premium. But for that, you get more leather in the interior, and if you go for one of the hybrid engines, you also get active noise cancelling. Now, the one I'm in at the moment is the ST Line X Edition, and it comes in at around about £30,000. So not only do you get the ST Line sportier looks, you also get bigger 19-inch wheels. There's also an active rear tailgate, as well as a panoramic sunroof. The good thing is all cars come with an 8-inch infotainment screen, and while it's a little bit dull, there's not a lot of colour on there, it's nice and crisp, really sharp, and it's also pretty damn responsive too. Of course, most people are probably just going to plug in their iPhone or Android phone and use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto as standard. And there's also different ways in which you can connect that up. We've got a USB-C port, a regular USB, and there's also a wireless charger down here too, which is really nifty. All of that comes as standard. Now, there's a bit more variation when it comes to the digital cockpit. Now, on entry-level models, you get a mix of analog dials and a digital display, but on this ST line model and also on the Vignale, you get the full 12.3-inch digital cockpit, and it's really good looking. Not only has it got this really nice Ford blue to it, which makes it feel modern and techy, it gives you all the information that you could want, and it's also customizable, so you can view different bits of data while you're on a really boring and long road trip. What I love about the Kuga is that you've got a really extensive kit list as standard, but I'm a little bit disappointed by the overall build quality of the cabin. But let's start off with the positives. Ford really nails touch points. It knows that you're going to be spending most of your time on the steering wheel and also changing gear if you've got a manual, so it makes them the nicest parts of the cabin, and it really shows. This is a really lovely wheel with proper buttons on the wheel as well, so it just feels like a really nice thing to hold and use. And same with the gear lever. It's also got a really good shift as well, again, if you go for the manuals. There's a little bit of leather here and there on this ST line, but the overall plastic quality isn't that great. It's a little bit scratchy and just feels a bit tinny. It's also got quite a dull look to it. It doesn't really feel like a car that's just come out in 2021. This could have come out in 2015 and it still probably would have looked a little bit outdated. And another thing I find a little bit frustrating is the infotainment screen, because, and this might be seen as nitpicky, it's just plonked straight in the middle of the car. It's not angled towards you, so it looks kind of sharper on one end than it does on the other. On a more positive note, we've got loads of storage in here. So as I touched on earlier, we've got a wireless charger down here for your phone, comes as standard, 2 USB-C ports, one C, one A, and also a 12-volt charger. Moving further back, we've got a little tray here where you can put the keys when you're driving, and there's also a adjustable cup holder in here, which also acts as a nice deep tray. Now, it's really cool because, again, you can adjust it. But what I did find is that with a cup like this, which is thinner at the bottom and wider at the top, when you put it in, it does kind of wobble around a little bit on the road, which can get quite annoying. Of course, you can actually just pull that closed and cover it up if you don't want it. Underneath the armrest, we've got a pretty big bin, actually, with a little tray in there, but there's no charger in there, so just used to store, there's no CD player in here, but I guess you could store, I don't know, wallet, keys, whatever you want. And also, finally, there is a nice big cup holder in the driver's door. Now, in the back of the Kuga, I've actually got a lot more room than I was expecting, because things can feel actually a little bit cramped when you're sat up front. But in the back here, I've got absolutely loads of legroom with the driver's seat in my position, and headroom is pretty good. We've, remember, got the panoramic roof in here, which does usually cut away a little bit at headroom. And I think if you were 6 foot, it might feel a little bit tight, but as someone who's 180 centimeters, which is just under 6 foot, I know it's not too bad. Now, you do feel like you're sat a little bit upright at first, but you can actually recline the seat a little bit, which is a lot more comfortable. We've also got vents at the back here, a USB-A and USB-C charger too, heated rear seats, which are amazing. And also, because this is the ST line edition, you've also got this kind of leather in the middle seat and kind of surrounding the main seats, but there's also kind of this suede Alcantara effect too. Very sporty. Today feel like jacked up hatchbacks, and sure, you get a slightly taller position, but that's about it really. Whereas this Kuga feels like a proper SUV. I'm sat bolt upright, the seating position is really high, even though I've tried to lower it as far as I can, and the dash is very flat, it's not sculpted around you. So if you like that feeling of being in a car that's an off-roader but isn't actually an off-roader, then the Kuga's really got you covered. I feel like I'm in a properly big car. And like so many Fords today, this Kuga just feels really nice to drive. The steering is light but really direct and responsive, and we've got a nice responsive engine as well. This diesel, again, we're in the 148 horsepower version, which is the mid-range diesel. Feels like it's got plenty of punch to handle pretty much anything really. And because it's a mild hybrid, you get a very, very small benefit when it comes to performance pulling out of junctions and from traffic lights. Now, the diesel engine is pretty quiet when you're cruising and you've got it in a cruising gear, but when you are pulling away from, say, a set of traffic lights, or you're wanting to overtake someone on the motorway, it can sound a little bit clattery, but that's almost kind of the byproduct of having a diesel. Really, I would think that if that's going to be something of a concern for you, take a look at one of the hybrids, because you're going to get a fuel economy somewhere in the region of one of the diesels, but without the clattery sound. One thing I can't unfortunately demonstrate to you while on camera, but is a really great addition in here, is the Bang & Olufsen speakers. They sound so good. Just a huge improvement over the standard ones, and I would say it's even better than some of the kind of upgraded hi-fi I've seen in some German rivals. They really are very, very, very good speakers. Getting up to motorway speed now, and it's pretty brisk. It's not the fastest thing in the world, but there is, again, a four-wheel drive, more powerful version than this that will get you to 60 a bit quicker if that's what you're after. In terms of the ride, it's a little bit on the jittery side. When you're at 70, and you're hitting the odd kind of bump, particularly if you're on the M25 with its notoriously coarse surface, it can kind of send a few little judders through the car, and it does feel a tad uncomfortable. Nothing that I would say would be grating on a long car journey, but if you're after a more pillowy ride, then I don't think the Kuga is the car for you. I've also got some pretty neat tech in here as well. So I've got active cruise control, meaning I can set the cruise at 70 miles an hour, and if someone in front of me slows down, the car will detect it and gently apply the brakes. Unless, of course, they've stopped in the middle of the road, and then the car will apply the brakes and put on an emergency stop. Road noise really isn't that bad. You've got a slight little hum from the tyres, but there's barely any wind noise. It really is a very quiet and serene place in here. So should you go out and buy a Ford Kuga? Well, I think if you're part of the Ford family already, perhaps you own a Focus and you're after something of pretty much the same size but with a slightly taller ride position, then this new Kuga does the job wonderfully. It's a huge upgrade over its predecessor, but like a lot of Fords now, it kind of just feels like every other car in the range. Yes, it feels like quite a it's distinctly SUV, but the whole cabin in here is very similar to what you have in a Focus, and that's the same can be said for a Puma, which is very similar to a Ford Fiesta, which isn't a bad thing. I wish there was a little bit more luxury in here, But in true Ford fashion, you're getting a really good equipment list, and it also feels properly put together. A very solid and refined car. I think if you're looking at this not just from a family perspective but also a company car, I would absolutely look at the hybrid versions, particularly the plug-in hybrid, because I think it'll just really give you the ultimate experience. It'll be nice and smooth, you won't have the clatter that you get with a diesel, but it'll also be significantly cheaper when it comes to company car tax, and I think this would make a great company car. But if you think prices are a little bit steep for the Kuga, then worry not, because you can head over to yesauto.com and check out all the great deals we've got on both new and used Ford Kugas. And the best thing of all is, because the Kuga's been around for about a year now, you should be able to find some pretty good discounts. So if you've been wowed by the Puma and seen it plastered all over car magazines and websites, but you fancy something a little bit bigger, then I'm sure the Kuga won't disappoint.